So, have you ever had that feeling where you were told, or maybe you realized that you needed to be locked in? And it's just one of those things that, I feel like is thrown around all too often. People talk about, hey, bro, you got to lock in, bro. We got 6 months left of the year. You need to lock in. It's summertime. You need to lock in. The winter arc is here. You need to lock in. But I don't hear enough people talking about how the actual lock in is flow state. And that's what I'll be talking about on today's episode. If you do not know me, my name is Champ and I help men win. I'll be helping you guys win today by giving you this piece of information that you can hopefully be mindful of when you approach life. So, I want to talk about this concept because I feel like there hasn't really been enough people talking about this specific concept. So, there is a difference. Being in flow state is the most ideal that there can be, and I'm going to explain the difference between both of those. So, the ideal of being locked in is not the pinnacle of states of feeling. The pinnacle state of feeling is flow. It's just flow state, man. People have heard of that. Maybe few of probably have actually felt that experience, but I'm going to explain my own personal experiences with flow state, trying to be locked in and all that as well, right? And what I will say to start, because I want to preface with this, I feel like people get these two things conflated sometimes. They think sometimes when they're suggesting somebody to lock in, they're actually talking about getting into flow state. Usually, flow state is going to be what it is. It usually doesn't get conflated with being locked in, but um, the other is very very true. So I want to give you a few attributes that I've recognized when it is typically associated with being locked in. Being locked in is associated with being disciplined. This is something that needs to be a very intentional act. Something that must be something that needs to be resembling something of ultra concentrated, and at the very least very conscious, right? These are things that you must these are attributes of being locked in. When you're locked in, you know what it feels like, you know what you need to do, you're planning on what you need to do, you're acting on what you need to do. That's being locked in. But the difference is this: the attributes of being in flow state is where the work is effortless, is where you have a single focus and nothing else is distracting you at all. You're acting the way that you're supposed to be acting, but you're doing it in an unconscious manner where you don't need to put any extra thought, because that is just who you are. That is just what you do. And that is the difference, right? I feel like a lot of people, they have this ideal of needing to be locked in. Maybe they're trying to pursue monk mode, or maybe they're trying to pursue a short period of time where they feel like they need to lock in. Maybe they're starting to feel the pressures of life, and they feel like, this would be the perfect time to, set aside some of the distractions in trying to actually figure things out and achieve this locked in state, right? This is the ideal. You heard a lot of people talk about, hey, bro, you got to lock in, bro, you got to lock in. But it's not as good. It's not as good as what people like to think, because you have to think about it. You have to think about it. You have to prepare yourself, and then you actually have to go ahead and act it out. And you have to think about the actions that you're taking, and you need to be making sure that you're not slacking off. But there's extra worries that aren't really associated at all with being in flow state. Being in flow state is a different feeling, bro. It's a different state. It's a different state of being, bro. One is obviously intentional. The intentional act of being locked in is something that you have to think about, something that you have to remind yourself of, something that you need to. And I keep reiterating the same things because it really is kind of hits home, right? These are things that you actually need to be concentrated in, while the other is doing without thinking. There is no thought. It is just what you do. It is just who you are. It is just you. And it's as simple as that. So I'll give you an example. One of the best examples that I have for this is this, right? Let's say, for example, you have two people, right? One or both these people go to the gym. Let's just say one is in their first week of going to the gym, and one is within their first 5 years of going to the gym, right? The person that's been 5 years into the gym is in a state where they don't need to actually think about being disciplined in going and putting in work in the gym. It's something that they do. They already have their routines planned out. They know exactly what they need to do when they go in before the gym, when they go into the gym, they know exactly what machines they're going to use, what workouts they're going to go ahead and do. They know exactly what their macros are needing to look like, and they're just acting in flow. They don't have to think about those things. They just have to move and act. But if you're a person within their first week, maybe you're going to be a lot more oblivious to these things, and the lock in is going to need to be a lot more conscious. Okay, I need to do this. I need to think about this. Okay, what workout should I do? It's a process of trying to figure out and act on what you need to do, what you know you need to do. More importantly, but it's not the same, right? They have different approaches. They have different focuses, right? In flow state, you can even get to the point where it's just something that is just passive. It is no longer an active or like I said, a hyper conscious thought. It is just something that you're just so locked in. It just you can't even get out. You're just so locked in. Um, but what I will say to add to this is when you're trying to strive to get locked in, there is a bit of resistance whether you feel it or not, right? Like I said, a needing to be disciplined, right? If you're 5 years into the gym, do you need to be disciplined to go to the gym? Or is that just who you are? That is just what you do. You just know what you're doing, and you're just acting it out because it is just your routine. There's a difference of identity. There's an identity separation that does need to be mentioned, right? And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, right? There is a being locked in provides a little bit of resistance that most don't recognize, that most aren't just they're just not conscious of. But when you're in flow state, that is your identity. It is your identity. It is the way that you move. It is the way that you think. It is what you act on, right? So you need to expend a lot more energy needing to be locked in, as opposed to when you're in flow state, you don't need to expend as much energy because you're blocking out everything else. There's just a single focus. There's a single route. I'll just say a single focus, a single concentrated point. When you're locked in, maybe you're locked into a few different things and you're trying to, block out some of the bad habits, some of the bad identities, some of the bad, you know, some of the bad thoughts that you have. When you're locked in, there is nothing else. There is you and the goal that you're on the pursuit of, and that's it. So I'll give you some examples, right? I've experienced this playing basketball. I've experienced this within my work, the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. I've experienced this within editing for the videos that I've done, which I've edited probably like over 500 videos by now. I've experienced this with even talking on the mic, not being conscious. The difference between somebody that's locked in and the difference between somebody who's in flow state is one is self-conscious and the other isn't. If you're locked in, you're thinking about yourself. And your focus is somewhat divided. You're thinking about yourself. And what I will say is if you really want to get out of your own way in this life, don't think about yourself. Think about everything else that isn't you. And that is really how do you get out of your own way. That is how you achieve flow state, right? So for example, right, I'll give you an example when I play basketball, right? It's not always this way, but I can access this. There's a mode. If you would have heard some people that have played basketball with me, there's a certain mode that is associated that I can turn on. Not everybody can do this, by the way, in basketball, or not everyone can do this in their own whatever they're dedicating their life to, right? When let's just say the difference between me being locked in and me being in flow state. In flow state, I'm not even conscious of myself. I'm so locked into the game. I'm so locked into the focus that I have for the game, which is trying to win the game, doing whatever it takes to win. I'm not focused on what I need to I'm not focused on what I need to do. I'm focused on what it takes. That's it. And if you look at the basketball players that are able to achieve this flow state, it's the same way, bro. They're not thinking about themselves. They're trying to do whatever it takes. That's it. But the people that need to lock in, when you need to lock in, you're coming from a place where you weren't locked in. right? You need to be aware of that. You need to be conscious that that's exactly the reality that is. If you need to lock in, or if you say I'm locked in, that means you were just locked out. That means you were just you weren't where you needed to be anyways. But if you were already acting, then you're already achieving flow state. So if a person needs to lock in basketball, maybe they made a few mistakes. Now they start to think about their shot. Maybe they need to start thinking about. Maybe they're thinking about their defender and the ways in which they're approaching how they're being defended. Maybe they're thinking about their next shot. When you're in flow state, you're not thinking about the next shot. You're thinking about I'm trying to win. I'm trying to do whatever, and whatever. You just don't think. You just don't have that many thoughts. Like I said, it's a single focus. That's the only way I could really describe it. Or I'll give you my example with editing. Right? There's plenty of times where I've edited and time just flies by. That's it. I'm just doing what I need to do. I'm not thinking about anything else. Literally nothing else is on my mind except the task at hand, and that's it. Versus when I need to lock in, maybe I'm distracted. Maybe I'm going on my phone for a few minutes. Maybe I need to log back in. Okay, let me work for a little bit, and maybe my thoughts start to drift away. Maybe I can say, you know what, I need to lock in. I need to recenter my focus, and then now I'm back. You see what I'm saying? But it's a constant push and pull. Right? And what I will say that I want to add on top of all this is when you're in flow state, you're just moving, you're just doing, man. Or let's just say right now, right? When I'm doing this podcast, right? Or when I'm filming anything, right? When I'm in flow state, I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about the thing or the value that I need to provide. That's my main focus. I'm not thinking about, oh, how does my hair look? Or, oh, did I say something stupid? I'm not thinking about any of those things because none of those things are of importance. What's of importance is the task at hand, and that's it. And that's the only thing that's worthy of focus. And that's the difference between somebody who's in flow state and somebody who's trying to lock in. Simple as that. Flow state is a state of play, and that's what people don't realize. So when it comes to your work or when it comes to something that you need to focus in on, you need to make it as if it was a game. Because when you're in flow state, that's all that life is. Life is a game. That's it. But when you're needing to lock in, you're thinking about needing to be more intentional with your work, with your action. There's more intent that needs to be focused in on. But when you're in flow state, everything is a game. Everything's a state of play. These things just become. These things are just. It's just a different. It's a different mode of function. People don't mention that enough. When you're in that state of play, everything fades away. Time can pass by very, very quickly, and at the same time, when you're living in the moment, it's almost as if everything slows down. You're in 0.75 speed for what you're doing because you're so locked into what it is, or not. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? You kind of get mixed in with it, right? But you're so immersed in your work, you're so immersed in the task at hand that everything fades away. There's no other thought. There is nothing, right? And time begins to slow down, while time is also passing by fast because you're not worried about anything else. And like I had mentioned, being locked in provides. It suggests something. It suggests a state that you're not and a state that you're aspiring to be. But when you're in flow state, there is no state to aspire to be in because you are already in the optimal state. You're in the state of play. And people don't talk about that enough. When you're in the state of play, that's when everything is easier. When you make things a game is when they become easier. When you make things or when you think of things as work is when it becomes a lot more difficult to do the task at hand. There's a lot more of a barrier. There's a lot more barriers of resistance that comes with your thinking, that comes with your action when you're looking at these things as just work. But when you're thinking about these things as a game, that's when you can begin to achieve that flow state a lot more. And yeah, that's in essence, that's pretty much my message for today, right? Understand the difference between both of those things. There's a certain mode that you're in when you're in flow state. There's no thinking. It's just acting. That's it. When you're trying to lock in, and maybe you're locked in, maybe you can achieve certain states of flow. But some of the time, and I'd say probably most of the time, you're probably not in flow. You're in midst with divided focuses and trying to recenter your focus back in on a single focus. But that is essentially the difference. So find yourself in a flow state. You find yourself in a flow state. You don't find yourself locked in. That's not exactly the way that life works. You don't find yourself to be locked in. You're either in flow state or you're trying to lock in. There's no other way around it. So, and that's the question. That's the $1 million question, KJ. So KJ's in the comments right now. Hello, chat. Need to be locked in for this video. Let's go. How would you be able to get into flow state for long periods of time? In order to achieve flow state, you must know exactly what you need to do, and you must not question any of what you need to do at all. And then, like I said, to get that, I can give you practical advice in order to try to access this, or to try to drag on this period of flow state. These things come and go. But how well do you know the task at hand? How familiar are you with the task at hand? And that's going to come down to how long you can stretch these periods of flow state. If you really know what you need to do and you're doing it, then you're in flow state. How would you be able to be in flow state when focused on one thing many different avenues? Would you be able to be in flow state when you focus on one thing or many different avenues? To an extent, man, I really, really do believe it's mostly going to be a single focus, if I'm being honest with you. Single focus at one time. You should never spread yourself too thin. The issue that a lot of people run into is they try to, and I found myself in these periods here and there where I'm trying to focus at too many things at once. And you're trying to balance out all these things. And I mentioned in our previous podcast before, balance is simply an illusion. There is no such thing as balance. The only thing that you can do is try to balance the imbalances. That's it. Try to make sure there's equal imbalances to each thing that you're trying to pursue. But it's all going to lean on one side. You're going to be spending 80 to 90% of your focus. You should be spending damn near almost 100% of your focus on one thing and one thing only. And then when it's time to move on, then you move on. But people need to be aware of this, right? When you try to spread yourself too thin, you're really dividing the energy and the brain power that you can really feed into one thing. And that's where people get derailed. And that's where people get lost, right? A lot of people who are anxious about the things in which they need to do, of course, they're not locked. They're not even locked in. They're trying to lock in, but they're never in flow. They're focused on too many things at once. There's too many excess stimulus that they're getting distracted by. But the person that's in flow state, who knows exactly what they need to do and is just acting on it, and that's the thing. Don't think about acting. Just act. Just do what you know you need to do. That it's as simple as that. If you needed to achieve all these, you know what you need to achieve on a daily basis in order to have a fulfilled life, right? We all know how compounding your work, your intentionality, your actions, your habits. We all know that these things compound over time, right? You must understand and have a firm grasp of what your ideal day even looks like. What does your ideal day look like? If I want to be a certain person in the next 5 years, that person's going to have a few things that are probably going to be of their focus, that they focus in on 100 or 90 to 100%. When it's time to lock into that, they can focus in from about 90 to 100%. They give it their all. They're in a state of play. That's the type of person that you should strive to be, is to have a few things that you can fully lock in on at the same time. And it sounds kind of contradictory to what I had mentioned with KJ, but I'm saying the way that you spread your focus too thin, right? When you're in one moment and yet you're thinking about the past, you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to do this week, and what you're going to do on Friday. All those things fall at the wayside when you're in flow state. When you're in that state of play, everything goes away, and there's just one thing that you're doing in front of you. That's it. And it's exactly what Jaden said. I think it's the first step. I think focusing on the first step of whatever you need to do rather than all that you need to do. That's the exact thing that I was really hinting at right now. And that's the difference between somebody who can achieve flow state and somebody who's just trying to lock in or who's locked in. You can make a lot more progress in the flow state. You will make a lot more progress in the flow state as opposed to trying to be locked in. So just try to recognize where you are at. And in a weird way, you've heard this, and I'm going to mention this. I really shouldn't have to mention this, but you've heard the trend, probably the retard maxing, right? The retard maxers are the ones who are in flow state. They don't overthink about what they need to do. They just do, and that's it. And in that specific funny example, that's how they get it right. And that's what a lot of people who are overthinkers, who are, people who consider themselves intellectuals, they get lost in thought. They get overwhelmed by all the things that they need to do. And it's not like they're wrong. You do have a lot of things that you need to do in this life. You do have a lot of things that are probably worthy of your focus. But all you can do is be here, or right now. You're watching the video, you're in flow state. Because there shouldn't be any other focus that you have outside of the video that you're watching right now, the task at hand right now. And when I leave this podcast, whenever you end this episode, whenever it's over, what's the next thing that you must do? Don't overthink it. Just do. Just move. That's it. There's no other way around it, man. Act in flow state, you'll be in much better shape for sure. This illusion of being locked in is simply that. It's an illusion. Just be in flow state. Think about the task at hand, act on it, move on to the next task. Don't be doing one task, thinking about the next task, thinking about what you need to do this weekend, thinking about the thing that you did last week, thinking about whatever. Think about what you're doing right now. Give it your all, because whatever you're doing in front of you should be worth your all. And that's it. That's all I have to say. Make sure you go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, Spotify, Kick, all at Life of a Champ Podcast, pretty much on every single platform. Also on X, at Life of a Champ Podcast as well. It's either at Life of a Champ Podcast or at Life of a Champ _ pretty much on every single platform. Y'all have a good night. Next podcast is going to be on Thursday. Tapping with that for sure. I just posted a few shorts, and leave a like on those as well. And other than that, find your flow state, fellas. Don't fall for this illusion of getting locked in. Lock in on flow. That's it, man. Y'all have a good night.